Okay, let's take a look. This is another review copy here, Donning the Purple. This is it's a Kickstarter project that's complete. I was asked, I think, to preview it. I'm not sure, but to do something before release, I guess. And I was unable to do that, but I was given the opportunity to take a look at it now after it's been released. So that's actually very cool. I wasn't expecting that. If we look at the somewhere, maybe not. So anyway, it's somewhat supposedly set in the year of 4 emperors, but it's not really. There are 4 different years. I would say that it's more indicative of not necessarily that particular little slice of Roman history, but a broader slice in general. Although it does, scale down to a small scale. It might be possible to be able to get the year of 4 emperors to happen in this. But I think that's more just a, it says here 193. It may be possible to have a year in which there's 4 emperors. I think it's pretty bloody unlikely looking at the design and the way it's put together. But we'll see. Let's talk a little bit about what we have. A bunch of pieces. It's got a Euro-y feel to it, and there's a worker placement element to it, I think. Well, not exactly, kinda. You spend these to do things, if you want to call it worker placement, you can. If you don't. So these count as legion markers. These are going to be the enemies, barbarian hordes and whatnot. Parthians. I think they're still one. This is grain, and as usual, I'm not, I read through the rules, but I'm going to go through the rules a little bit more closely with you here. These are your victory point markers, and that's, of course, your goal for the game. These things are indicating no income for an area. And these are coins. These are base camps for the enemies. And then these are an optional role. I think we're going to play with most of the optional roles, just because I like to experience more of the game than I can by just taking a look at the basic game, even though it means, I'm looking at it for the first time with that. What's kind of odd is that there's these cubes. Now, the game tells you what they are. They're excess pieces, essentially, that replace these wooden pieces that, are kind of more shaped. I guess some people maybe favor a simpler pure color basis. Obviously, the shape basis gives you an advantage if you're truly colorblind, like fully on colorblind, not just unable to distinguish, say, red, green, or something like that. But I actually think these colors, I don't know many people who would have trouble with those, but certainly some people are full-on colorblind and they can't distinguish any colors, and the cubes would be a horrible choice in that case. My guess is what happened was there was a Kickstarter goal to get these, and these had to be supplied anyway. I mean, it was kind of like, well, you could just not produce them, but what the hell. So it gives you some extra pieces if for some reason you don't like shaped pieces. Yeah, I've babbled a lot for that. These are player cards. The other side is almost the same. There's a little bit of difference. This is the advanced side. It shows some differentiation between what some of the capabilities are here. I believe in particular these monuments do different things, although honestly, it's not even spelled out on here, which kind of confuses me. I expected them to be spelled out on the sheets. I may have to do something to indicate what's what. These have certain transition information on them that tells you, that serves as a mnemonic. You also have a player aid card that tells you what gives you victory points and the different phases in the game with a little bit of additional information. The phases are repeated up here. You have a map of provinces. They're segmented into areas. There's basically 1, 2, 3, 4 different areas on the map. That correspond somewhat historically. This line, I would say, is pretty blurred. I would put Judea more in with Asia Minor, but just for various reasons in terms of political gatherings. But it's and you'd probably have Hispania being very separate from Gaul and stuff like that. So in terms of the divisions, they're really kind of very broad, and they have their own reasons within the game. One of the things that appeals to me is this idea of a price for grain. That was one of the things that convinced me, hey, I want to play this. It does track something that's more than just an area control type game, and it certainly is more than that. It also tracks the happiness of the empire. Now, like I said, the game is a 3-player game. It's got roles for 2-player or for solitaire play. We're going to talk mainly about the 3-player game. I'll briefly go over the others as through the rules very lightly. But one of the players is the emperor, and he has this special sheet, and he has additional rules that he enforces. And in particular, he's very concerned with the happiness of the empire. If the happiness gets too low, he's killed. He's removed from office. Let's see. Like I said, these are the legions. We also have estates. Everybody starts with 1 estate in Rome. You'll be able to build up to 3 more throughout the board. What else? You're going to have the opportunity to build buildings, and that includes more estates, colosseums, or monuments. This is not a building. You're not building forums. And they get placed on here. And then in the 3-player game, the first 4 will get produced. But there's some capability to screw around with that. You pay to put them up on the production chart. And if they're in the first 4 when it's time to build, you build them. These little dotted lines are sea connections. Land connections in the normal borders. What else? We have famine boxes to mark where the famine is on each region. The Senate. So another thing that you can do is you can buy senators. And the first senator only costs you 1. As you go up further and further and buy more and more of them, well, as people buy more senators in total, the price of the senator goes up. The last one is the one that matters. Controlling that last senator is important. We got some cards. Event cards. I don't know what these do. Forum cards. I don't know what they do. Plot cards. Those are going to be cards that the player. I'm assuming the event cards generate a random event. The forum cards, I'm not absolutely certain what they do. We'll get to that. The plot cards give the players. Each player starts with 1, except the emperor, who gets 2. A special ability or a couple of different possible special abilities, and also a modifier that they can use. So these are kind of like a CDG type game in which you have an option to use it for an event type thing or a point. So we're going to call this a CDG. It really is a similar mechanism to that. You also have, each player gets a hidden agenda card, which is things that will give you positive and or negative victory points. So for example, this player will get a victory point for each region, and there's only 4 regions that is completely free of swords. But if none of the regions are free of enemy forces, you lose a victory point. These are kind of broad goals. As you can see, wow, how am I going to encourage and discourage that? Well, honestly, you're going to do that by being the emperor. And we'll look at, how those take effect in play. So the goal of the game is to collect your victory points over the course of 4 rounds. But, like Republic of Rome, yeah, we just played a Republic of Rome-based game. So, like Republic of Rome, this has semi-co-op victory conditions, and they are just as carefully worded as they are in Republic of Rome. Now, the rulebook is written, I believe the author is, English is not his first language, and in some cases you're not absolutely certain on a first reading of a sentence what the meaning is. I feel like I've been able to suss out meanings from everything from context or from examples or from something else. But there is a little bit of effort that's put into that, just in case, you might look something up and say, oh, that's obvious, and then find that, no, actually, as you dig deeper in the rules, you may be misreading the intent. But here, I believe that this is the intent. So the game is over and nobody wins if one of these two it doesn't say everybody loses. A little different. All regional capitals are controlled by the enemy at the end of the year, and all 28 enemy tokens are on the map at the end of the year. One of those two conditions. Okay, so there are 4 capitals, regional capitals. They're where the troops are at the beginning of the game. If all of those fall, the game's over. Or if all of the enemy swords make it on the map, the game is over. Okay. Now, let me see. Yeah, I don't think that's reiterated in a way. Now, see here, this is what I remember. Okay, so this is different, and this is where the subtlety of wording becomes very important. So for here it says, in these same cases, the game is over and everybody loses. On the front it says nobody wins. And I'd see those two conditions as particularly different. Because end of game scoring, the player with the most victory points is the winner. Okay? Very specific. No definition that those other players are losers. Now, this may be going on that presumption that if you did not win the game, you lost the game. Personally, I think that's a mistake to use. I don't know if it matters too much in this game, but in Republic of Rome, it's very much a mistake. And I went into that heavily when I was playing Athens. By choosing to not distinguish between not winning and losing, what you do is you encourage some people to end the game in the failure condition if they're going to not win. Because they don't see a difference between, well, they see themselves tied with everyone else if they can cause the failure condition. And that means if somebody's running away with the game, the other two players can try to destroy Rome. Is that reasonable? I don't know in this. I can tell you for a fact that it really screws up Republic of Rome. If people are playing that way, it changes the dynamic. People aren't trying to maintain Rome, and maintaining Rome is such a fun part of that game that when there's a significant proportion of the players who decide, I'm behind, I'll go for tied, that it causes a problem. In 3 players, I don't know, and at such an abstract level. But I do very much like to look at that distinction, and here it feels like the author is not really making that distinction between whether you did not win and whether you lost the game. Okay. But I'll make it. All right. So the rest of The first couple pages is the setup of the game, which I've largely done, and some explanations of component pieces. Well, some pictures of components, which I haven't done much of. I've shown some. The actual play of the game. There's a simple sequence of play, 8 pieces. First, enemies are going to show up and move a bit. Then you get grain, which shows up in the Emperor's hands to deal with. Then you draw some cards. I guess this is the event cards, but it might be the Flora as well. Each player then gets their own actions, and they get a plot card at the end of their turn. Then the buildings are produced, as I mentioned. Then the Emperor has to distribute the grain he has to each province. Now, provinces are the smaller pieces within a region. And then each province generates money for the Emperor, and each estate generates money for the owner. And the Emperor also has estates. So he's going to create more money. And then the Emperor gets victory points based on how happy the people are. And you get 1 victory point if you're in this zone, etc., going up all the way up to 5 if you can get the people very, very happy. Now that's kind of a collaborative thing, and the Emperor has some capability to pass the Imperial Purple on to his own selected heir, and we'll get to how that works. One thing to note, everybody starts with $15, except the Emperor starts with 10, but he does get the extra plot card to indicate his power. Okay, let's start looking at how these mechanisms work, and I'm going to have to swap batteries out. It's just kind of a shame because it means I have to compile the video, but probably would have had to anyway. It's not a tiny rulebook. So the incoming enemies phase, what you're going to be doing, oh, I didn't explain, we have a whole bunch of dice here, and shit me, they're different. So there's a couple of normal dice, 2 white, 1 black, there's a 4-sided die, and there's 2 of these special dice. Okay. So each region is going to generate 2 enemies. You roll a d6 to see which province they're going to show up in, and they'll be put in the same province. So, 2 guys could show up here in Mauritania, and these are numbered 1 through 6. Each area, I think, has 6 provinces. If there are legions or a pawn, these pawns are representing the player and I believe some force. In the province, the enemies don't get placed in that province. If there's a building, the building is destroyed. It goes back to the player's map. Okay, then all enemies on the map are moved 1 province closer to their regional capital. Each enemy unit and Roman legion has 1 strength. The player pawns have 2 points of strength. When an enemy moves, they have to move towards the capital of the region. They always follow the province numbers up or down, depending on the capital. If the enemies move in a province containing legions and are players that has a strength equal to or higher than the total number of moving enemies, they don't. They stay where they are. If they move into a province containing legions or pawns with less, the legions are removed and the pawns are placed back in Rome. If you lose your pawn, you lose 2 stamina, and stamina is going to be lost by pushing it down into the used box. Now, losing stamina essentially means that person is dying. You're basically, and that's why it's kind of funny that this is only 4 years, because you're going to run through a lot of people, I think. But yeah, as you expend stamina, you're becoming older. At least that's the way the Emperor works. We'll check for these guys, but I think it's meant to represent the same thing, but we'll see. But you do run through Emperors quickly, I guess. For a year? I don't know. Okay. If the enemies move into a province with the building, okay, if they move into a province with the building, they destroy it. And remember, they don't move if they're not stronger. If they enter with a capital, they will never leave until they're killed. If somebody does manage to kill all the enemies in a capital, or the last enemy in a capital, they get a victory point marker. And there's a little space for those. Okay. And this should go here, not there. This is indicating the player. The three players are different. One starts out as the emperor, one starts out as the emperor's obvious heir, and one starts out as the leading senator, who should actually probably have a senator on here, I believe. Not positive of that. Okay. And they can never leave their region, nor can they enter Rome. Okay. Second thing is harvesting grain. You roll a 4-sided die to determine a region, and a famine marker shows up in that region. See? This is not it. It looks like it, but that's a special thing. Yeah, those gold guys are the famine markers. More than one famine can show up in a region. Not at once, but... Okay, if there's an aqueduct in the region, and the emperor can build up to 3 of these, then you don't put a famine in that region. Each region has its own province that has a farm in it. But this is definitely this one. This looks like it's the capital. Here's the region with the farm in Gaul. Here's the region with the farm there. And up here in Armenia. And that region will produce an amount of grain. These guys produce 3. This guy produces 6. You put that number of grain on the grain symbols on the emperor map. Okay, so this is kind of weird. These are noted as being 5 grain each. Nothing is noted as being 1 grain. Potentially these are, but they appear to be a 1-for-1 match. When we look at the emperor sheet, we have something a little different, where we have kind of a numbering basis. So if I pulled all the grain, I think what I'm supposed to do, and this isn't explained, so all the grain would be 15. I could represent that with 3 here in the 5 box, I think. I don't think these are necessarily 5. I think these are however much they're in the box for. If I produced 6 grain, that would be easy to do. 5 grain is easy, I could do 4. Yeah, I think I can represent any number reasonably with these 5 markers. If I can't, I can use those other yellow markers if it makes it easier as well. Because if they're just a counting mechanism, it's not a problem. Okay, if there's a famine with the farm doesn't make grain. If there are enemies in the province with the farm won't make grain. Oh, and Rome produces 3 as well. That may seem strange to you. It sure does to me. So, and it'll get even stranger a little later, because when you have to feed, you end up feeding the provinces. Somewhat the opposite of how Rome actually worked. Here's how I'm going to justify what I'm saying. The number of provinces under Rome's control has to do with how big Rome itself is. I know, in 4 years that probably isn't the case. But the tendency was for all the grain to come into Italy. The provinces could feed themselves largely. There were some exceptions, but mostly the provinces could feed themselves. The big problem was getting enough surplus grain for that massive city, sort of like a foundation situation with Trantor. we're going to put this aside and say, all right, they're showing the mechanism completely wrong. And I won't try to harsh on it too much, although you know how I feel about when games represent things completely incorrectly. Because here's the problem. You bring a new, you say you bring a little kid and start teaching him something about Rome. And, hey, I got a nice little abstract game, sure, but it'll teach you something, but it's teaching you the wrong things. Now, obviously, assuming that you're knowledgeable enough to point out those inconsistencies and those problems, that's great. Then it's fine. But what if you're not? Okay, now you're embedding not only your own knowledge is getting distorted, but this kid is and everything. It's just, wow. It's one of the things that I really don't like about games which give incorrect impressions. And I don't even care what the game is, This one seems to try fairly hard to tie itself to a period and a time and a location and the Roman Empire. So that's really problematic. And I have the same problem with Struggle of Empires. Get different problems with Struggle of Nations. It's a Zucker war game that has been on my mind recently and in conversations. But even a game like Risk, which is so clearly not tied to an area and a time or anything, that could give a small child, a young kid, some really bad misconceptions. And I'm not saying that they won't overcome them at some level or another when they learn real history or something, but they might always kind of taint something and cause problems. I know that I've got little inconsistencies in things I remember. And one example is when the Athens game, when I was playing that, I realized all my life I've had the first 4 letters of the Greek alphabet wrong because the school I was brought up in just happened to name them in the wrong order. That was just commonly spoken in the wrong order. And so they're tied that way, and I know they're wrong, but they're tied that way. And it's like things like that you just, now your brain is stuck on that, and it's going to take a little bit of extra processing to overcome this little problem. Well, that's what Risk can do, but something like this could cause, real issues to me, where you start thinking that, Rome produced a surplus of grain and sent it out to the colonies? Yeah, no, that is the opposite of the reality. Certainly grain was grown in Italy, especially if you were to count Sicily, which doesn't seem to be its own province, so okay. But that grain, the excess grain, always went to Rome. It was Rome that needed the food, not the peasants working the fields on farms, who generally had an okay amount to eat, and if they didn't, who gives a shit? So they starve. They're not going to riot. They're not going to kill. They're not going to destroy the empire. Okay. If you're not used to my review, my intros and playthroughs and reviews, well, there you go. All right. And again, Egypt produces addition. Now, the emperor gets 5 events, and one at a time, he'll be playing them and reading their effect out loud. Once all of them are done, a forum card is played. Now, the forum card, I remember how these work. That's going to have spaces where you can place stamina chits, I believe. It's an action that players can use for the rest of the game. Now, some of them, maybe all of them, are places where your stamina just gets sucked into there, but it's going to have a permanent advantage or effect for you, which might be like victory points or something. We'll see as they come up. Okay. Player actions. You start with the emperor, and then you go in clockwise order. When all players have completed their turn, you go to the next phase. The emperor gets 3 actions during his turn. Each other player only gets 2. Each action is going to cost a stamina chip. To take an action, you move a stamina token from your unused. You place it on the action space you want on your player mat. Okay, I'll do it there. Or on a face-up forum card. If you're the Emperor, you can also choose spaces on the Emperor's chart. Okay. And I don't know. I'm bad with iconography, so I don't want to try to guess what everything means here. But like build a state has a cost, and one of these, maybe, maybe not. We'll see. Okay. You take all your actions before the next player. However, some actions can be copied by other players. Okay. Copying an action, let's jump ahead. I understand why this is placed differently in the rules, but it's an important facet. And I think we need to understand it actually before we go deeper into the rules. Okay, so when you take an action that's got a C on it, which is most of them, not assassination, and nothing the Emperor does, each other player can pay a stamina and the coin cost for the action, and then they get to do that action on your turn. So this is kind of like a Puerto Rico type thing, except you're not taking the action, and your big advantage is being able to do it first rather than any kind of special bonus from taking the action, which is a big deal if you're building a building, because your building is now earlier in the line. Okay. Copied actions aren't going to cost against the players who copy them. And it is normally, looks like it would be in normal order. Yeah, player to the left. Okay. Yeah, I think copying should be here before we get to the actual actions. There's no limits to how many tokens that can be on an action space on a player map. When your turn is over, you draw a plot card. And all your stamina tokens that you used, except if they're on a forum card, move to your used stamina. If you have no unused stamina, you die, which means your family member dies, your stamina is reset, and you are now another person. Now this is a big deal for the Emperor. For a player, it generates a negative victory point every time you die. So burning through your stamina can create more victory points for you, but it comes with a penalty. It's a 4-year game, remember. Okay, things you can do. All right, one is move your pawn, which is this. And you can move up to 3 spaces on the map. You can cross regions and travel across dotted waterways. Your pawn has a strength of 2. Wow, my throat's beginning to go. If you want to go through a space that contains enemies, you have to have a greater strength than the number of enemies in the province. If your strength is greater, you destroy all the enemies when you walk in. The happiness marker is moved a space to the right, and you roll glory dice equal to the number of enemies removed. Okay, we got another rule we need to look at. Glory dice are the special dice. They have, if you get pips, you get coins equal to the number of pips. If you get a P, you get an extra plot card. And if you get a circle, one of your used stamina tokens comes back to you. Otherwise, you get to reroll. So you always get some. Okay. You can use the strength of your plot cards to increase your own strength before the pawn moves. Now this gets weird, and this is where the wording gets troublesome. If you use the strength of a plot card, you cannot use the other effects on the card, and you must put the used card in the discard pile next to the deck. The increased strength only lasts for the duration of the battle in one province. Okay. Well, there I'm beginning to see some tension between the way these are worded. The plot card can increase your strength before you move the pawn, but it's only going to work in one battle, which means the second battle can't do it? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. If the strength allows it, a pawn can move through several provinces during a move action. Okay, that just seems to contradict. He does not have to stop after a battle. Well, maybe, maybe not. Okay, in this example, the pawn has a strength of 2. The player boosts his pawn strength by the plot card to 3, so his total strength is 5. That's higher. Now he can move into any 2 provinces and destroy enemies. Or into Moesia, and then Dalmatia. So, it looks to me, well, you're big enough to go into there, so you don't need the plot card. Yeah. It's not clear to me what it's supposed to be. I think what's meant is that it lasts for the entire movement. But then there's this one line about it only lasts for the duration of the battle in one province. Yeah, this is... You see, but then there's if strength allows it, a pawn can move through several provinces during one move action. I'm left with an uncertainty of what it's meant. I think it lasts for the entire move action. I think that's the intention. But it's clearly contradicting itself. Now, as is often the case, the designer said, hey, ask me any questions if you have any. Yeah, I don't do that. I also don't look at the forum. At least not when I'm describing the rules. Because I want to understand, I want to find the errors in the rules, and I want to point them out as I'm going through this introduction section. And I want to look at the problems. I've got to stop. I don't understand the reasons behind that, but it's what I do. Okay. Bribing the senator. And that's not there. Certainly not there. I don't know where you put your dude if you do this. Bribe senator, it goes here. Oh, yeah. Okay, so you put your token here. And these probably shouldn't be here. They probably should be off because you're going to have tokens in there too. We'll see how it goes. Okay, what happens is you put a Senate token in the leftmost available space. You're going to pay an amount of money equal to the space number. And, of course, you spend one of your actions. You can build an estate, but these can be copied, which means everybody else gets a chance to do it too. And remember, that's important. The next guy's going to get to pay more, but he gets to go further right than you, which is important. Building an estate, that's these things. It's going to cost you $3. And it's going to produce $5 when you get down to the tax phase on each turn. So they're obviously a great investment. However, you don't just automatically get them. You pay $3, you put one of these on the furthest right, well, the furthest left empty space on this track. And then if you're within the first 4, you'll show up on the board. And then the others slide down. Because it can be copied, other people can play beyond it. Build monuments, same thing. These cost you 5 coins, though, instead of 3. And in the place building phase, it can be placed at the bottom of the player map. Okay. Each monument given to a player, maybe those shouldn't be on the board at all. Each monument that are placed back on the mat gives the player a permanent upgrade of victory points. Not listed here. Not listed there. Oh, these are. Okay, so you take it from here and you put it here. So they're going to give you a permanent upgrade. Upgrade or victory points. Normally, these are all fixed. But with the advanced game, each player has their own set of bonuses. So for example, here he gets 2 plot cards. He gets +2 on every die roll that he rolls. Other players get fatigued on this one. This one, I think he gets 4 rolls of the bonus die and a victory point. You know, so they're differed by the players. In the base game, they all are the same set, which is listed across here. It's +1 strength, +1 to all die rolls, and +2 victory points. Assassination. This one cannot be copied. This is going to cost you 5 coins, whether you want to kill the Emperor or another player. If you want to kill the Emperor, you're going to roll a d6, and you take that many stamina tokens away from the Emperor. However, before you roll the die, you're allowed to play a plot card for its value. The number in the corner. The Emperor is also able to play a plot card to defend himself. And that's the way it's worded. However, it goes on, there's no limit to how many plot cards each player can play to boost their attack or defense before the die roll. So, again, I think that's simply a wording issue. Unlike this one, it doesn't leave a serious ambiguity. It seems pretty clear what's intended. Okay, assassinating a senator costs you 5. You roll a d6. If you get 2 or more pips, the senator, the rightmost senator, is removed from play. And you're beginning to push your, things back down. If you're the next senator, that may be worthwhile. If you only show 1 pip, you fail. And again, you can use plot cards to try to increase that value and to defend against it. Okay. The Emperor has some special abilities. For 15 coins, he can place the heir token on his own player map. However, that's only allowed if no one has the heir token on their map. So once an heir is named, unless you can get that guy dead, and even then I don't know if the heir goes away. Look at the rules for death. The effects of death, my favorite Rollmaster rule. Okay, one of the things you can do is move legions. And remember, these take one of your tokens going up here to do as well. And if you spend them all, you're dead and you're no longer the Emperor. You can move 1 or more legions from a single province. They can move up to 2 spaces. They cannot leave or pick up legions along the way. They have to travel together for the whole thing. They can travel across waterways. If the Emperor wants to move through a legion with enemies, the number of legions has to be greater than the number of enemies. If it is greater, all the enemies are removed from when the legions enter. The happiness marker moves a space right, and the player throws glory dice equal to the number of enemies removed. Was the other just 1 glory die when you move yourself? No, equal to the number of enemies removed. So you always get glory dice equal to how many you kill. Okay. You can train new legions. You can place new ones on the map. There's a limit by countermix. They can be placed in regional capitals that don't have any enemies. Each one's going to cost you 2 coins, though. But you can build as many as you like off of one stamina counter. You can build an aqueduct. It costs you 5 coins, and you put an aqueduct on the production line. When it gets a chance to be placed, it can be placed in one of the provinces. When it's in a province, the happiness moves 3 spaces to the right. You can take 2 famine markers out of that region. If the aqueduct leaves the map for any reason, the happiness moves 3 spaces to the left, but no famines happen. There's only 1 building allowed in each province. I don't remember that rule. It's probably up here. Okay. During the place buildings phase, which is the next thing after everybody's taken their turn, the rightmost senator, it's the senators who do this. Whoever's got the bonus position on the senator is able to swap any 2 buildings on the production chart. If there are no senators, no one can do it. Each player then places their buildings in the first 4 positions in the province of their choice that doesn't have a building or enemy. The buildings are placed in the order in which they're stated on the production line. Monuments go on your player map and don't take real space. So you're going to either be building estates or aqueducts. And after the first 4 buildings are placed, you slide things down. We need to swap battery, not much help there. Okay. Next thing is distributing food. There are 25 provinces on the map. Any that do not have enemies will have to be fed 1 grain. Now, in addition to the grain that you've produced legitimately, you can buy more grain. And that'll be bought at the grain price chart. If you feed every province that doesn't have an enemy, happiness goes up by 1. If you don't feed every province, each province that you didn't feed that you were supposed to drops the happiness by 1. Uh-oh. If the emperor dies because he didn't feed the people, the new emperor doesn't have to feed anybody else. Shit. I really have to stop smoking. I know the weather's affecting this somehow, but any grain that's left rots and goes back in the pile. You're not going to be able to stock grain. Okay. Each of the 25 provinces on the map that doesn't have enemies creates 1 coin for the emperor. Every player will get 5 coins for each estate they own during the tax phase. If there's a famine, none of the provinces or estates in that region produce any income. And then, end of year, we have a cleanup. All the regional capitals, if they're controlled by the enemy, or if there's 28 enemy tokens, the game's over, everybody loses. You're only allowed to hold 3 plot cards at the end of the year. The emperor gets victory points based on his happiness level. You get to remove 1 famine marker from each region. Okay. So it's going to be unlikely for famine to collect up. That's going to have to happen through event cards or something, because there's normally only 1 famine. And the year marker moves down. At the end of the 4th year, you score the game. All right. There's some clearing up of some of the specifics. I've tried to explain these things as we got them. Basically, if you played this differently, if you were reading the rules, they suggest, hey, you can just start here, but maybe you shouldn't. Yeah, I feel like these core concepts have to be gotten. What about death? Okay, you die after the action of your final stamina is completed and after anybody's copied it. When you die, you put a negative victory point in your player map. Then you reset your stamina by getting all of your stamina on the player map in the Emperor's map and place it back in the unused stamina section. If you have more actions left, you get to continue your turn. So remember, you get 2 or 3 actions per turn. Your heir gets to follow. You cannot have negative stamina. You don't pay if you have some penalty in play. I don't know why that would be the case. You know, like if you lose 2 stamina, If the player with the heir token on his player board dies, the heir token remains until an event, plot card, or becoming the emperor removes it. Yeah, like I said, dying doesn't get rid of that. Okay, when the emperor dies, then we go to the line of succession. The next emperor will be the player with the heir token. And then this goes back on the emperor space so that it can be bought. What were these others? Oh, troops. Okay. If the player that was the emperor also had the heir token, he will become the next emperor, but he still has to move the heir token up and thus set himself up so he can buy it. He gets his negative victory point still. The player with the rightmost senate in the Senate is the next choice. If there's no heir token, whoever's the highest senator is, he loses that position in the Senate. And then finally, if there are neither of those, which seems like an unlikely circumstance, an auction is held and each player is allowed to bid cash. And you just continue in a cycle until somebody stops bidding. If the emperor dies from an event card, the new emperor continues to go through the event cards until all 5 cards have been drawn. So you could kill off multiple emperors that way, I guess. If a player assassinates the emperor and becomes the new emperor, then they continue as the new emperor and they have an additional action because they're the emperor during their turn. If you die as the emperor, you don't lose that bonus action. We talked about glory dice cards, the hidden agendas. We've looked at them a little bit. Event cards, we will read them as they come across. Plot cards, they have special rules on them, like I said. Forum cards. Okay, so this forum card, for example, if you place the first piece, you can get $15. The second person to place in there gets $10. But that's a permanent stamina gone from you as a player. So it's a little dangerous. If they've got a larger circle, multiple staminas can go in there by different players, same player, whatever. All right, 2 players. A few little minor changes to it, but for the most part, it's the same game. The 1-player game is going to be, first of all, you don't have as many cards in the game. And you're going to be competing against these red senators showing up. I'm trying to see what else is going on. Yeah, I mean, basically, there's going to be an enemy player of a sort, but it's kind of a bot type thing. I don't like things like that. I hate 1-player games. I certainly am not going to play this solo. This looks like an interesting 3-player game. If a game only has solo rules, yeah, well, what's my option? Okay, let's go to the advanced rules. The first one is special stamina cards, or markers. Each player has a C and a money one. The special rules of those, and I believe these replace... Yeah, these replace your normal staminas. Now, I'm not going to play with this for various reasons, but maybe it's a good idea. This may be one of the more interesting choices. When you use this on an action space, it can't be copied if it has a C on it. If it has a money on it, you don't have to pay any coins to do the action. I'm not sure that I understand what this is meant to represent, so I'm staying away from this one. End of year events. So there are 4 end of year tokens, which will be, they have different things on them. Yeah, they actually have different things on them. So I'm going to be flipping these. These are going to be sitting here, and they're going to take a special effect at the end of the year. So that's going to be a random set of things. Now, unfortunately, they're showing, so you know what that year is going to end as. Do I want to play with these? I think I do, because I've got cards in the deck that screw with them. And I've shuffled the deck together. So these cause different things to happen that are kind of cute. The player mats are different. They each have different monument values on them, and those are spelled out here. There are also some additional event cards, including 2 enemy camp cards, which will be a 5 strength point enemy that cannot move and will not produce coins or grain. Whenever a new enemy unit is placed with the enemy camp, though, it creates an extra new enemy unit. There's an Assassination Forum card. When you put your stamina there, you get an assassination attempt with +1 on the die roll. Attack and defense can be boosted normally. It's kind of risky, or kind of crappy, because it eats one of your stamina, but maybe using that late in the game is worthwhile. Poison is going to eat away at someone's stamina if you play that. There's limits to what can be used in the solo game from the advanced game pieces. And that's it. So I think we're going to play with everything, except obviously the solo rules. And I don't think we're going to play with these. I think while they may add some play interest, I just have real trouble justifying why you'd be able to build buildings for free, or, you know, in particular, be able to prevent somebody from copying things. I feel like they're more just options to give you more player choices without any good grounding in anything. So let's see how the base game actually plays. But right now, we'll send this one up. And then, well, then we'll go to bed before we get back to this.